works for me. All right, and we're live. Welcome back to another Corona Geek here, where we talk all about mobile app development using Corona SDK. I'm your host, Charles McKeever, and today we're going to talk about progress ring modules and maybe some custom composer stuff. I'm not sure. We'll see what we can get to. We've got a lot to talk about today and a little time to do it in. I feel like Smokey and the Bear when I say that.
I'm going to warn a guest, but somebody has a cat.
I've got a cat.
Okay. Ed, I thought that was you.
No.
Yeah, that's what that means.
Is this a lunchtime show? I thought maybe lunch wasn't agreeing with me. All right, well, on the panel today, we've got Dr. Brian Burton joining us. And we've got Ed Marino from Roaming Gamer. Yeah, it's always backwards, Ed. It's left to right. It's always different on everybody's screen. Also joining us is Greg Pugh from GP Animations, Jason Schroeder from jasonschroeder.com, and Steven Johnson, a.k.a. StarCrunch in the forums. So, hey, guys, what is going on? We've got some great stuff to talk about today. Real quick here, some housekeeping notes. Last week, we talked about sharing data between composer library scenes. So if you didn't catch that on Corona Geek 126, go back and check that out. We talked about 3 ways to share data between scenes, how to save data between gameplay, and how to add data to a settings file without losing the original settings, which I thought was uber cool. So Ed did the honors of presenting on all of that last week, and we actually went out and busted those files up into snack size clips, which will show up at youtube.com/coronageek just as soon as I hit the publish button. I chopped them up, put them out there, forgot that they were there, and I need to hit the publish button on them. And that's what happens when you upload stuff to YouTube in the background and do other things. You forget they're even there. But if you didn't get a chance, go check out 126. It's a good show. Simon Fearby. Sorry, Simon. Published an augmented reality blog post. I don't know if you guys have seen this. He's building an augmented reality app, and that needs to know it needs to know when the user tilts and rolls the phone around, and it can be update the user interface with the augmented reality elements. So he says Corona already has an accelerometer code, but he wanted something that would display it in a human-readable degrees. So if you go check out his blog post, which will be in the show notes, the link will be, he puts the code out for that for Corona so that you can convert those into human-readable degrees, which is kind of cool. So if you're looking to do some augmented reality stuff, check that out. He also gives a shout-out to Doug McFarland for the original Arduino code, which is kind of cool. You know, he takes some Arduino code, put it into Corona, share it out to the community. It's good stuff. Talking about sharing out to the community, we've got lots of great forum discussions going on inside the forums at forum.coronalabs.com. If you check out the show topics thread in the Corona Geek forum, we are taking suggestions there for show topics, and the list is growing. But we need your suggestions as well so that we can talk about the things that you want to talk about. So if you get a chance, go check that out. We'll put a link in the show notes. Let's see here. I'm looking at the notes here. Crave Creative is doing a sale on their widget themes. So for $14.98, you can get a set of widget themes, and he's got some great stuff over there. If you haven't seen those already, it does all the images, it does all the slicing, got all the code for it over there. You can see everything, all the source files and stuff when you download it. So go to cravecreative.com. Click on the I think there was the Developer Resources tab, and has all the details there. So he's got several different sets of widget themes that you can pick from with different styles and different colors and stuff like that. So it's good stuff. And yeah, I'm going to go ahead and call it that the winner of January's Geek Games is Greg Pugh from GP Animations. Greg continues to stun and amaze us with the scores that he gets on these apps. So for this month, we played Chip Chain, and if you didn't get a chance to see, Greg, what was your last final score?
See, this is saying 16,442, but when I actually got it, it was like 16,500 or something. I don't know, so I don't know how that changes it, but 16,000 something. Yeah. Well,
Well,
yeah,
you-
this is 1644.
You are turning out to be our reigning champ. Okay, I see it. Yeah. Well, you are turning out to be our reigning champ at this competition, and I know Ed, for one, has voted to limit you.
I'm getting ready to vote you off the island, buddy.
But I think of it this way: competition is a healthy thing in this case, and I think we should just get to the point where you develop enough. What's the word here? Ire? Is that ire? Is that the word? Where people just hate you for winning, and they want to beat you. That nothing else in their life matters but beating Greg Pugh at these games. It will become the Greg Pugh Games Challenge.
Well, I need stuff on Amazon, so I'm gonna keep playing.
You say whatever it takes, right? Whatever it takes. That's right. Haters gonna
I need to
hate.
get some cat litter now, so I have to go order that. So I'm not going out in the snow to go get cat litter.
Too much
We should-
information.
we should
Appreciate
do
that
that.
last part.
We'll change. Here's what we'll do. We'll change the prize from a $50 gift card to something like a year's worth of something, right? And then somebody else on the panel gets to name what that year's worth is, right? So you could win it, and then Ed could name a year's worth of cat litter. So it'd be like the Mad Libs for game. Okay. Well, congratulations, Greg. I appreciate you, spending the time to play, and everybody else who played and posted their screenshots over at facebook.com/coronageek. And we're going to announce the next game coming up here in the next couple of days. I don't have it selected yet. But if you have suggestions, then let us know either on Twitter or on Facebook. And if you want us to play your game, let us know that as well. That would be cool. All right, so let's talk about progress ring. So if you haven't been following the show lately, we've been talking about this thing. Jason Schroeder created a progress ring module that allows you to add a progress ring to your games or apps, or your gaps, using one line of code. And so, Jason, how did this thing come about, and what are your plans for it? And
Sure. Well, really, it got started, I don't know, probably 8 months ago or so. A weekend, I was working on an app that you've kindly mentioned in previous shows called Social Poetry, which went through a phase where it needed to download a whole bunch of data from Facebook. And so I needed something to, let the user know that something's going on, your app hasn't frozen or crashed, hang tight. And so I sort of sat down and thought, it'd be nice to have it in a ring shape. So I sat down and sort of started tinkering with it. Got it to a place where it worked, but it wasn't really polished or where I wanted it to be, and sort of put it aside, used the default Corona Labs widget progress bar, just because I could just plug it in, it worked, it looked nice, and it sat there. And then I was trolling the forums one day, and somebody posted a topic and said, I'd really like to do this. Does anybody have any code? And I thought, I've got that. Let me polish it. Let me get it to the point where it's shareable to the one line of code thing, which is what I like to do with any module that I'm going to put out. I really like to try and make it as easy to use as an official Corona Labs API, just because otherwise, why am I sharing it? So sat down, promised it. I said, give me a day or two. Fast forward 2 weeks when I finally get around to posting it. And in the middle of those 2 weeks, and I will say this, I think there's a link on my website to the original forum post. I am fond of my own solution, and I think it's great, and I really appreciate that you've taken the time to feature it and have me on here. But there are other ways of achieving this, and Matt Webster, who is awesome and contributes lots of great code under the name Horacebury on the blog and on the forums, had a different way of doing it. It's a little more roll it yourself. You'd have to copy his code and change parameters, so it's not set up like mine where you just require it in and call a function. But it works great, and my module, which runs 200 to 300 lines, is not nearly as compact as his. So go check that out if you're into that. But anyway, so 2 weeks while he was doing that in the span of an afternoon, I finally got it ready. I put it up on the site, and it seemed to be popular with some people. I think some people were able to use it, which is great. I think you featuring it here on the Hangouts has driven a little bit of traffic to my site, so thank you. And it's still a work in progress in my mind, and we can get to some of the areas that I've discovered in the intervening weeks that I think could use some extra loving. But in the original version, there was a bug. If you had any sort of config.lua file, it got all screwed up, and that's because when I was modularizing, I was just using the most basic, project I could, just a main.lua and my module. Thankfully, somebody posted that. I fixed it. I plugged it in, and now it's just up there, and people are downloading it. So we can walk through it. You guide me a little bit here, because I don't know if I'm going to be too verbose or not verbose.
Well, first of all, I keep Stephen, I apologize. I keep muting you. You can unmute yourself if you like. There's a little bit of background noise there, and a little bit of, I think there's a bird.
Somebody has a bird. We got a bird and a cat.
Yeah. I don't think.
But I know that no. This is Stephen. Stephen's over there. But Stephen, I know that Jason had said that you were involved in some of that. So Jason, what were you able to pull from Stephen?
Well, that actually goes to the color picker. So the color picker I actually did probably close to a year ago and posted on my website, and that was used in the demo project that I used for progress rings. So I wanted to be able to show that you could change the color, and so I wanted that to be done, with the GUI. So I just plugged in my own color picker module, which, like I said, I published I think last March or April. But that was me I discovered a very similar bit of code that Steve had published, I don't know, probably a year before that on the Code Exchange. But it was graphics 1.0, and it did some other things that I didn't need it to do, so I stripped a little bit of functionality out. I put my own little visual spin on it, added alpha channel to it, but I can let Steve talk to his original code, because it was very informative. I mean, a lot of it, particularly the math for calculating an RGB value based on where the reticule is, within the box, I lifted very generously from him.
Okay, well let's come back to that then when we get to the color picker portion. Do you have plans to share your screen with us, or what are you?
Yeah, sure.
So if you would just show us so that people understand what we're talking about. Show us the progress ring, how it works, and
Okay, this is my whole screen I'm showing. Is that all right? Is that showing up for everybody?
That's
you want to minimize your camera though when you're doing it.
Okay, great.
Always we have the recursive camera thing.
Okay, so let's see here. So I'm just going to fire up the simulator here.
I got a question for you when you're. I don't want to interrupt you while you're doing this. But...
Sure. So I'll have that there, and I'll bring up the module itself over here on the left. Nobody make fun of me. I use Text Wrangler. I like Text Wrangler.
Good thing you said not to make fun of you, because I was getting ready to.
Every 6 months I think, I'm gonna try something new. I'm gonna try Sublime Text, and I just go, I'm used to it this way. I like it this way.
I used to still use Visual Studio, and they made fun of me on the show here.
So here's the sample project I made. So basically, it calls my progress ring file, creates a progress ring here, automatically sets it to 0. Now this is actually a slightly modified version of it. I'm going to put a new version up soon. What I realized was an undocumented feature was that a progress ring actually fires off or dispatches an event when it finishes a rotation. And I realized it was in there, but I didn't really document it. I also didn't fully build out the event table that it dispatches, so it was just dispatching a table with a name. So I added a target, so the standard sort of Corona event jargon. So event.target would reference the ring, and I added a position. So if you can, here, let me load up.
Well, I want to highlight while we're here that people can see from the code itself how clean it is, and then the example, of course, you've created a sampler that shows you all the different settings, so you can mess with things without having to go in and create a sample project over and over again, or fiddle with the code itself. But you've also gone to the lengths of documenting everything in the blog post and actually in the file when you download the project and stuff. You have documentation from there.
Up here
So
I've got, how to use.
yeah, I think that goes a long way toward how much time and effort you spent to develop this out and how easy it is for the end user to use. So.
That's the hope. I feel like, oh geez, I put like 60 lines wrapped of stuff. I don't know if anybody ever reads it, but somebody did. You did, so thank you.
Yeah. Well, I think it's worth it. I mean, it's one of those things. I've seen lots of code where you go in and you're like, some of it's obviously self-explanatory. You can read it and you're like, okay, whatever. But then there's sometimes where you just don't know what they were thinking at the time, and you need some context. And you've definitely supplied more than enough context for that. So just wanted to point that out in case anybody's wondering, is this something that I could use in my project?
Thanks, I appreciate that. Basically the way it works is you require in my module, and then here's my main.lua, which actually is, this is sort of complex because it's, it has all of the sample is more complex in terms of its main.lua because it has, this little control panel for covering it. But, basically all you need to do is call, let's get to it in here. Basically you say, whatever variable name you want to use equals progress ring dot new, and that's it. You can call that with no parameters at all, and it will create a progress ring, but it sort of goes to my sort of default. Let's actually get rid of that, hit save, and so this is the default progress ring here. So it's like a donut shape, so it's got a hole in it, it's set to I think 0.33 is in terms of the depth. So there's a few. I guess some of the parameters, let me see here. So when you're calling it, you can set what the radius is, and obviously that's just sort of how big you want your progress ring to be. A ring color, which takes sort of a standard RGBA table in terms of what you would like the ring, meaning I guess you would say, not the background, so what indicates how far along in your progress you are. A BG color, which is the background, and again that takes an alpha channel, so you can have a transparent one if you wish. Let me go ahead and add this back here so I can make these adjustments on the fly and we can see it. So if you wanted to have a 0 alpha channel background color, you could go here and you see that there. By default, so the ring depth would be 0.33 like that. Ring depth we did. Stroke color, which is the sort of the stroke, the outline, which you can very much like a lot of Corona display objects, you can choose to have none at all, or you can set your width, and that's going to be both outside and inside if you have a ring depth less than 1. Let's see here. Counterclockwise is just a Boolean value, so if you set it to counterclockwise, it's going to run counterclockwise, obviously. Hide BG is a Boolean, so if you wanted to, let's say your background color, you set it to red and it has a full alpha value, and oh shoot, I want to do that, you can just change the hide background value. It's the same thing as having a 0 alpha, essentially. Time. So the time parameter is sort of the default time that you want it to take to go from 0% to 100%. And you can change that on the fly. So when you tell it you want to go somewhere, you can say go from 0 to 1 or 100% in 2 seconds, and it will do that. But if you neglect when calling that method to specify a time, it's going to calculate that based on how the initial time that you set up here. So it defaults to 10 seconds. But if you want, you can say it takes 10 seconds to do a full rotation. So if you tell it to just do a quarter rotation, it's going to calculate that time based on that. It's only going to take 2.5 seconds. Position is just the starting position. So it defaults to 0. You would have it with no progress made. But if you wanted to create one, let's say you were making a game, and this was a health bar for a character, and you already know that their health is, at 100% or at 50% before you create the ring, you can specify that start value. And bottom image and top image, which are you can place an image underneath it if you wanted to, or place an image on top of it if you want to. And those just take either JPG or PNG files, and it works like a display new image rect. So if you are using dynamic image scaling at 2x, at 3x, what have you, it's going to automatically take that and load that in.
Excellent. Okay, let me open this up to the panel here. So, Ed, did you have any? I know you were excited about this a couple shows back. Did you have any comments or anything? Or
I do have a comment. Last time, or maybe on a prior show, I mentioned that the thing. I mean, I think the whole thing's brilliant, but the one thing that I thought was really brilliant, which tripped up a lot of people when they were trying to figure this out on their own, is the dynamic mask.
Mm-hmm.
So what you do in there is you generate a mask when you first create the ring,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can reuse that over and over, and that way you get exactly the right sized mask, and you don't have to have it present. And what I said on the previous show is one could take the technique that you've presented and expand upon it to create a mask with a variable shape.
Can I show you what that looks like? Am I getting too far away? I'm working on modularizing it, and it's very nearly ready to go. But I've got a working code of what I call Automask, and I can show that to you. Maybe we should wait until
Yeah, I don't want to let your cat out of the bag.
No, it's fine. I really wanted to have, my plan was to sort of have a blog post ready to go and say, and it's up on my site. It's not quite up on my site, and I think that's worth talking about, actually. Some of the headaches I've had with this, particularly with creating dynamic masks, which I do for this, and this was the bug that I mentioned earlier that somebody found on the forums. If you were using a config.lu and you specified your stage size. So the problem with this is it's very easy if you say this is an iPad-only app. It needs to be 1024 by 768. But the way that I create a mask, and it was very easy with this because it's just a circle or a series of circles. But even with my other module that I'm working on, the way it works is, so I take an image or a group or what have you, and this I created an image by using a black square and a white circle, and I create that in a display group. And then I capture that display group to flatten it and save it as an image. And then what I do, or actually in this case it's a white square and a black circle, because then what I do is, all right, I think in this case I didn't flip it. I captured it as a white circle and a black square. But when I'm doing it with dynamic, with any image at all, what you can do is capture that image, take the image itself, so the part that you want to be hit testable, the part that you want to come through. I don't know if that's the part that's masked or the part that's not masked is the correct parlance on that. But you can take that, you make it black, you make it completely black, so you call set fill color to 0. And then you put a filter effect on it, and you invert it. So then what you've got is white, which is the section that needs to be visible, and you place a black square behind that. Then you'd use a display save call to save that to an image file, and then you reload that image file as a mask. And it really is pretty simple. It's not what I dislike about it. I do have to throw a timer delay in it. I use 1 millisecond. I know it probably takes, technically speaking, a little more than that. But because you're saving that file, you can't in the same cycle, save that and then load it as a mask. You're going to throw up an error. But the problem with that is, if you're creating an app that's going to be viewed on multiple screen resolutions, which I think most of us do, whether it's a universal iOS app or whether it's any kind of Android app, and who knows what size you're using, Corona's great. It does, you can use letterboxing, you can use zooming. The problem is the display.save API is not going to save that in terms of the display coordinates you're using. It's going to save it to the device's native resolution. The problem with that is the requirements for a working mask image are very strict. So you need to have at least padding of 3 pixels on all sides. That part's easy. The tricky part is the width and height of that image have to be divisible by 4. So like I said, going back to earlier, if you know it's going to be on an iPad and you know it's 1024 by 768, it becomes very easy to say, great, let's make sure that this square that is the background of my mask image, both are divisible by 4, no problem. If you're taking that same app and now running it on an iPhone 6 or an iPhone 5, where the native screen resolution is different, you might end up with a image file whose coordinates are not divisible by 4. And that is sort of the sticking point that I'm working on with my Automask file. And it's something I've discovered is a bug in my progress ring, which it's not always going to present itself. I don't think it's showstopper yet. If you're testing it, you can work through it. But my goal is to get it to the point where it just works all the time in every case. So there's going to be an update in the next, if I'm on my game, week. If I'm not, a couple of weeks.
This is one of those annoying things where it works sometimes and doesn't work sometimes, and you're like,
just to give you a glimpse of how it looks here. So if I think my progress, this demo, you can see here, this is what happens when you get a mask file that's not. I shouldn't be doing this. I shouldn't be saying, look, here's the bug in my code. But yeah, I agree with you going back several minutes now that the progress ring itself is not necessarily what I think is the coolest feature of this particular module. I think there's a couple of things. I think one thing, too, that's buried in me creating the mask that I think is kind of cool, if you ever need to, to use the display capture API, or is it display save? One of the two, possibly both. What you're capturing has to be completely on the screen and completely within the bounds of the screen, and it can't be invisible. It can't have it can't be flagged is visible equals false. So one thing I do when I'm creating the mask here is, you'll see, I'm going to highlight it here. I say local cover up. So I create what's called I call it cover up, and it's just a display new rect, and it matches the default background color. And then what I do is on the stage, which is the most root base sort of visual layer within your app, at the very bottom of that I insert that cover up. So that's essentially mimicking what the background color of your app is and throwing a rect there, so that you can, anything that you want to do now, you can put it behind there. It's on the screen, it's within the bounds, it is visible, but it's not visible because you've hidden it. And I think that's actually something that has potentially lots of uses. So you can see here, this is where I sort of insert it on the stage. And when I'm creating a mask group here, I do the same thing here. I place it just below that cover-up rectangle. Which I think is something that's sort of buried in here that has potentially lots of applications.
Now, not to give you more work, but I noticed one thing about your code that I was wondering if you'd considered. So you're doing this over and over, making changes, and so it makes perfect sense to save it into the temporary directory. But it occurs to me that you might want to have like a setting for like a non-debug setting or something that says, instead of saving it to the temporary directory, save it to the documents directory, and then check to see if it exists beforehand.
Okay.
So you don't even need to generate it.
Oh, yeah, that's actually.
Because then you could have like a generation phase in your game where you're generating up the things, among which would be this, and then afterwards it would always be.
Yeah, I think that could work, actually. I think, too, what I could do is name the file the radius, or the radius, some combination that indicates what the radius and the depth is, because that's going to be the differentiator is, the mask itself is going to change slightly depending on the depth that you specify. But yeah, I think that's actually, if I'm updating it, that's sort of a cool idea.
I got a question for you. This is a question. I hate asking questions where I could have checked it myself, but
that's okay.
Have you run 2 of these simultaneously?
Yeah, I have. Let me let me whip up. If you don't give me 2 seconds, I'm going to make a quick.
I always say that, but it takes like at least 15 seconds. Especially if people talk while you're trying to type. So I'll do that part, okay?
Sure.
So Stephen, did you have any thoughts on any of this?
Not so far.
Not so far.
No.
They were talking a moment ago about being able to generate and then save, and I thought immediately about your coroutine talk about doing different batching different actions and being able to jump between them. What kind of cat is that?
It's a cat that doesn't like being on the show.
Holy cow, man!
She doesn't like when I talk or when she hears talking. So.
She doesn't like that.
That's so funny. I'm sorry. It's just making me laugh.
No, it's okay.
You have the bird too?
No, the bird is outside.
Oh, I see. It's like a
There's just-
menagerie here.
There's just no sound muffling
So
of
funny.
any sort.
Like a Looney Tunes cartoon. I saw a footy tat.
They all want to be on the show.
Yeah. Well, the Lua programming in Lua book actually has an example where he downloads several files. Roberto does using coroutines concurrently. So, in that sense, I guess it would be the same sort of thing.
Yeah, I was just wondering if that would apply, that you could kind of swap back and forth between operations and maybe be able to.
If you were building up a huge file, then it would make sense. Like I'm also doing something with masks where I'm making several frames, and then if those took a long time, I could conceivably split them up across a coroutine.
Okay. Well, for everybody who's listening, Steven's written a blog post about coroutines that hasn't been published yet, but it's in the queue to be published, and it's an in-depth breakdown of what coroutines are and how they are used and how you can pass data between them, and it's going to be good. So look forward to that coming soon. It's going to be an awesome one. So what do we got, Jason?
So I've got these two rings set up now. You see, let me see here.
Okay, they're both operating at different speeds.
Yep, I set the one to go. Although one is my radius. Helps if you spell radius correctly.
You could do a ring races game.
So now you've got two. So the one is got a larger radius, is progressing all the way to 100% in the span of 10 seconds. The other one's taking 12 seconds to go to the 0.5 mark, to halfway. So yeah, so you could do this. You could have a whole bunch of them, and in my testing, it seems to run pretty well. Let me go back to sort of how it's constructed. I realize I sort of glossed over. Is that so? I've got what I have are. Let's see here. How many did I make? I want to say I made. I can't remember whether it was 36. I think it might be 36 slices or possibly 18 slices. So what I do is create a series of triangles, all with their rotational point right at the center there. And they sort of, if you think of it, they sort of slide one after the other, boom, 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 until you get the whole thing. And that was me. You could do that. You could create 360 of them. And for me, I think it was just about trying to arrive at a middle ground that sort of made sense. I wanted to keep it as low overhead as I can. I don't want to keep track of, ultimately the progress ring that's generated is just a display group, and it has some methods that manipulate its children objects. And to me it seemed like, okay, well, and I can't remember for the life of me now how many slices I created. Let me see here. And it was just sort of decide. And if anybody has any thoughts in terms of, that's too many. I mean, because ultimately, yeah, if you're going to have 20 of these things on the screen, suddenly you multiply that number, by the children objects in it. You are potentially rendering a whole lot of display objects at a given time. And Corona is pretty good at managing that and allowing you to have a whole lot going on at any given time, but you don't want to tax things needlessly. Let's see here. Yeah. So there were 10-degree slices. Here's where it is. So this is just sort of a for loop. you know.
So if am I understanding this correctly, that if you wanted to go in bigger chunks of time, like you wanted it to the progress screen to kind of jump a little bit, you could do that?
I don't know that it would result in jumping, because I'm using, I mean, a pretty smooth transition, so everything's just, it should, I could have done this with, I suppose I could have used just even as low as 4. You know, I could have made them a quarter of the size and rotated them that way. I just, it could have even used just rectangles, I suppose, but it just seemed, you know, and there's also some masking going on here. So when they're hidden, when you're not, you know, when the progress ring is at 0, you know, I originally was using just a check. So it would say, you know, if it's at 0, everything's rotation value, all of those triangle slices are negative, you know, whatever the rotation is, so that it would be to the left of sort of the vertical line. And no, go ahead.
Mr. Impatient, please go on.
Okay, and originally I used no masking at all, and so what I would do is, as it was progressing, once the rotation point was greater than, say, 0, make it visible, so that, you know, and that worked for you know, the later part of it, but you would end up having this sort of wiggly line up around the top as things are snapping into view. And I experimented with a few different ways to beat that. Some of which was, you know, maybe, so whereas the final one has slices that are all 10 degrees, maybe I did 10 1-degree slices, and then, you know, 35 10-degree slices to get the full 360. And everything I did just sort of, it just wasn't quite there. Up around that top line, you just get a little bit of wiggling, and just drove me crazy. So finally I said, oh, well, okay, I'll use masking to hide those things when they're to the left of that. And
I tell you, this sounds a little bit about like painting a room. I pay other people to paint rooms, because if I do it myself, it'll take me twice as long, and I'll see all the mistakes.
Yeah, I felt a little bit like that. You know, but this is one of those things too, where there's a reason I sort of just share this with the community. I'd love, you know, if anybody sees room for improvement, I'd love to hear it, because this thing can live beyond me, that's for sure, and it's not perfect by any stretch, as we saw when I put it on an iPhone 6 skin. But that part's going to be fixed.
Yeah, that's just a matter of time. That's just a problem that needs to be solved, and there's an answer out there somewhere. So.
I think at this point, if you guys are cool, it sounds like we're talking a whole lot about sort of the masking side of it. I'd love to show the Automask just to give you a sense, because we were talking about.
Can I request one small thing in your code there, just to demonstrate what you were talking about on the slices?
Yeah, absolutely.
Could you go back to line 210, please?
I can.
And just duplicate that line. That way you don't lose. I always do this when I don't want to lose my original, so just copy it down to.
Are we looking at the same thing? I'm realizing I'm working with the slightly modified one that.
I'm looking right on the screen here. What you've got.
Okay. So where the ring color.
Yeah. So duplicate the ring color, and then make ring color 2. Make that I modulo 255. So no. The second color in the ring.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So that what I'm going for here is it'll change. I modulo. I percent sign.
Okay.
255. And I always get this backwards, so it could be backwards. And then rerun your example.
Oh yeah.
See, what should happen, it's not real great. What I was hoping for is this would show alternating colors around your ring.
Oh.
But it didn't. I could have that backwards. Maybe it's 255 modulo I. I always get these two back. I don't remember. Oh.
Seems to go for a while.
iMod 1? I think you want iMod 1. Or divided by.
Yeah, we could just iMod 2. Something like that. I don't know. What I'm trying to do is get it to throw out different. I'm going to say a bad word. So. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. It's open parenthesis.
Okay.
Open parenthesis, I modulo 255, close parenthesis, divided by 255. I'm thinking graphics 1.0.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's kind of cool.
So it's just swinging around. It's probably a little bit hard to see, but so that's showing you how these rings. Can you Control Plus or
Yep.
whatever it is from your key? Yes. So you can see it's a little hard to see in the screencast here, but if people are looking closely, they should see banding in that upper one.
Yep. It's interesting too when you talk about the banding. So a big part of it was I wanted to be able to have a ring color that had an alpha channel. I just thought that was important, because you wanted to be. But because I sliced it out like that, as it was progressing, you would see all that banding. And there's a way to get around that. It's by using a snapshot instead of a display group for the ring group. A little bit of an overhead with that. It adds some masking. So in terms of nested groups, it becomes a problem. It's also only available to pro subscribers. One thing I did that I thought was actually kind of cool in this was to check that. So it's not always using a snapshot group. It only uses a snapshot group if you specify an alpha channel for your ring color. Otherwise, it uses a normal display group because I didn't want you to have that extra overhead if you didn't need it, which was actually something that I was sort of, if it's not too cheesy to say, proud of that I did with this. I thought it was sort of intuitive.
Well, anything you can do to increase the performance, and by having a snapshot, you're wasting if you don't need the snapshot, you're wasting an alpha channel.
Exactly.
Not an alpha, but a mask.
Yep.
Yeah, alpha channels are hard to come by.
Yeah.
Masks are, since you only get 4, I believe, on the iPad.
I want to say 3. I think you only get
Three or 4 overlapping masks, and you're done.
Okay. Well, that was awesome. Show us the other thing.
Yeah. So let's we'll go to my Automask file. So this is something I just sort of threw up, and we'll make it big. Just a Rorschach test, and I made it colorful just so that you can see how that goes. So if you click on here, it's going to say when a touch has registered. And let me open up my main.lua for this. So if I comment out down here, so this is, again, I'm modularizing it. So I have a module called Automask, and you can mask an image just by passing in automask.mask and passing in any Corona display object, whether it's a group, an image, what have you. So if I take that same thing here and I'm clicking out here, it's saying that a touch is registered, anywhere, including the background space. But if I go ahead and mask that, so you click here and then it's gone there. So, and it gets to a pretty fine point, where you can get to these little smaller guys here, and it still sort of shows up.
So for those listening to the podcast, basically you're able to touch the places that have color, but you're not
exactly
you're not registering and touching the places that are just the background.
Exactly. So this is not really useful in terms of masking in the visual sense, because really it already requires an image with an alpha channel and with transparent background. But I think a lot of people who are new to Corona, I think the first time you sit down with it, I know I did, you sort of go, oh, it's transparent, I shouldn't be able to tap that. But that's not the case. The entire width and height of your image file is touchable. It registers a touch event. So if you wanted to place an image underneath this one and you wanted to be able to touch it here, you're going to have to mask that image. So it's and certainly you can go through and create mask images for all your stuff. But this is something I just wanted to implement. And again, it's not quite ready for prime time, only because I'm dealing with trying to get around the creation of an image file that meets the strict requirements for a mask image. And with any kind of dynamic screen resolution, it becomes a bit of a challenge. And the math on it is not terribly difficult, but what I've discovered is because it's all floating point, it becomes like I'm having to add checks for okay, so we calculate, I've got a stage size of 1024 by 768. But whoops, I'm running it on an iPhone 6, so suddenly it's bigger. Okay, well, I calculate what the math is on that, and I can get it, and you can get it within 1 pixel, but it's going to either round up or round down depending on where it's at. And if you're off by that 1 pixel, forget it. The whole thing gets screwed up. And so it's a lot of back and forth. And it's one of those things too where I have a feeling that once I nip it in the bud, it's probably going to be some terribly simple thing that I probably just didn't recognize from the get-go. But it's going to get there.
Hey guys, on a previous show, I almost feel sure that Sergey talked about this a little bit when he was talking about his own perfect pixel solution.
Mm-hmm.
And he may have addressed the ability to deal with that round up, round down scenario.
Oh.
So I can't remember which show it was, but I'm pretty sure.
Well, I remember when he was talking about how to he implemented a method of creating a mask, a square mask, of any size.
Right. It was in the same time frame as that, but what I'm talking about is in the period right before or right after they added the new scaling, mode for Corona.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
He had come out. Sergey had talked about how to get pixel perfect scaling instead, sort of like the perfect config file. And he did some calculations in there that I believe handled that weird round up, round down problem you're talking about.
Oh, cool. I'll have to check that out. And yeah, because there's a whole lot of that. So the problem becomes, it just depends on, because I want to make this available for public use, I just want to try and anticipate any problems that might show up with it. And it's a whole lot of things. So again, if you're masking an image that is clearly contained within the boundaries of the screen, it's no problem. But I know the moment I make it available, somebody's going to want to mask an image that is bigger than the screen size, which is fine, except because you have to capture it and save it, it has to be within the screen. So you capture, you shrink it down, you capture it, and then it's like it's a whole kettle of fish because you have to shrink it down so that you can capture it properly, and then it's going to get blown up to a different size if the dynamics, because of the dynamic screen thing, you might end up with an image, and then you have to use the mask scaling. You have to use mask scale X, mask scale Y to get it to properly match up with it. It's a number of moving parts, but I'm confident it's fixable. I suppose I shouldn't be wasting this much time talking about something that's not finished yet, but I think it's going to be. But this is something that definitely jumped out of the progress ring. I think it sort of prompted this for me.
Well, I think out of that discussion just a moment ago, it's either going to be Corona Geek 111 or 112, because on that show we talked about, I think we talked about dynamic masks on show 112.
I'm almost sure it's 111.
Okay.
And he had a feature in there for selecting the pixel multiple that he was going to do his scaling to, which I think is what would help with this problem.
Okay.
And he's probably listening to the show, so probably.
I should make a shout out to him too. Yeah. Up until a week or so ago, this whole thing was dependent on a bit of code that he shared, which was brilliant because he was ahead of Corona Labs by a good year. In that the finalize event was not being called for children objects of a display group. So if anybody out there doesn't know the finalize API, drop everything and go look it up right now in the API docs, because it's one of my absolute favorite sort of unsung hero APIs within the SDK, because it allows you to clean up everything so much. If you've got a runtime listener that's tied to an object, it's such a pain in the rear to have to, keep track of that and get rid of it, and this is an opportunity for you to just go in and say, here's what happens when I remove this object, do this. But it was sort of broken for a while in the sense that it worked if you said, remove this object, its finalize event would be called. If you removed a display group, like a composer scene, for example, you'd think, oh great, all those children objects, all their finalized events will be called, but it wasn't. And it was one of these bugs that I think, unfortunately, it didn't get fixed for a year because Sergey had an awesome fix for it, and it was in the forums. I think they were like, oh, it's already fixed there. We've got bigger fish to fry, so we'll get to that.
Yeah, reduce the pressure on that.
Yeah, but you can see it, actually, if you look in the progress ring module, you'll see up at the top, here's the finalized bug fix. So, this is from Sergey, and I gave him a shout out in there. And I sort of added my own little thing here, which was just to test it. So it creates an object that's invisible. It removes that object. It creates a parent group. It creates an object. It removes the parent group. If the finalize event is triggered on that child object, everything's cool. We don't need to run this fix. If it doesn't, it goes ahead and runs that fix. And this actually, because Corona Labs fixed that just a week or so ago, there was a bug in how I was doing it. I needed to add a delay, which you see right here. And without that delay, it caused the thing to crash. And I was like, oh god, okay. Like Charles has been pushing this module, and now everybody's going to download the new daily build, and it's going to break.
It never fails to happen.
What's that?
I said it never fails to happen. You get on the show, or you get like press coverage of some kind, and then you get a bug. Like,
let me actually get an informal poll here, because my method for fixing this was to keep, because I want to keep it in there, because you never know, somebody might be running an old daily build or might be running the last public build, in which case they're going to need this fixer. But my method of doing this was to still test it the same old way. So create a display group, create an object, remove that display group, see if the finalize event's called. Another way to fix that would be to check the build number, which we definitely can. And if the build number is greater than or equal to 2544, then I wouldn't need to do it. The reason I left it the way is because you never know. In a future daily build, right, a regression bug might come back, and this might represent itself, in which case it's going to be broken again because the only thing it's checking for is the build number. What do you guys think? Am I smart in doing this, or is this an area where I should just place my trust that things are going to be okay, and I should go the simpler route, which is just to check the build number?
I have an opinion, but I'm going to let somebody else talk first.
Let's hear it, Ed. Go ahead.
Okay. I think it's a smart choice and acceptable in this case because the impact of doing it is low. Basically, what's going to happen is the first time this module is used, loaded, required, it's going to execute this bit of code. It's going to be invisible to you. It's not going to be an issue visually. It's not going to impinge the performance at all. So it's a rather long piece of code, but it has the benefit of never failing.
Yeah. That's true. Okay.
I would say use the other method if it was costly to test.
Yeah.
It's not.
One thing I realized that I might need to do, though, here is, actually, maybe not. Just because there's a delay in here, what I realize is if I might need to fix this because because there's a delay here, if somebody requires the module and then immediately after creates a new ring, because there's a timer here before that fix is going to get run, I might need to make, and it can be as simple as a flag. I can set a flag in here, and when you call, progress ring new, check that flag. If it's not true, set a timer there and rerun the same call, 10 milliseconds later or whatever. But I don't know. It opens up.
That's the one failing of. I have the same problem in my code where I do something tricky like what you're doing, and then I run into a scenario where I require and then use it right away, and then I'm like, oh, that code wasn't in place yet.
Yeah, so I might need to look at that. This is all good. This is all my way of saying this thing's going to be better in a week.
It's been improving over time. So
if you ever end up using a unit testing framework, you could put it into another function to test.
To run automated tests on it, is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
All the possible scenarios of what people could do with it, and then try to break your own stuff, basically.
I keep trying to select the screen here, but One thing
work for
I know we're running out of time, but we haven't talked about is the color picker.
Let's do that.
And Steve had
Particularly
a.
with Steve here.
I don't know. You said something about how it came from Steve, or?
It did. So let me see if I can find a way to go to it. So let me see here. If we go here, so this is my. I created again a simple sample, a similar sample project for when I released this. So you've just got sort of this here, and you click here, and it brings up the color picker, and you can change it, and it just sets that. It sets the fill color for that background image to whatever color you select. So, it brings it up. It's sort of Adobe style, or what I think is Adobe style, where you've got this bar over here. You can, select a color. And then the one thing that I added that wasn't in Steve's original implementation was an alpha channel slider here. But again, I think he and I I'll let Steve address that actually. We're looking for different things, because I think originally, Steve, it generated a hex number, which is something I didn't need, but I think was useful in your original code. Let me see if I can find that, because let me see if I linked to it, because I had a blog post from a year ago, and let's see here. Here
in my own case, I've since switched that to Corona style event listener. So if you have a color change, it'll just give you the change, and then you can make a hex string if you want. But
let me see here if I've got. No, I think that's yours actually, and then it's on the old code exchange, and I'll bet you it doesn't.
My cruddy old 216 color one.
Oh, it's like buried in the
back in the day before decent color picking.
The old code exchange where all the old links don't work anymore. But it was really useful. I mean, I definitely mentioned here, I say the closest fit for my needs was a terrific bit of code that somebody with the username StarCrunch, sorry, Steve. I didn't know who it was. I got somebody. StarCrunch, I don't know. And I just sort of said that it was close, but again, because of when it was made, it was Graphics 1.0, and at the time, I think it didn't. One thing that I like about my progress string is that you can do anything with the returned values, because it does sort of, you specify a handler function when you call it, and then after you pick your color, it runs that function and throws in the RGBA values so that you can do whatever you want with them.
So basically, if anybody wants to get the code for the color picker, though, that's still available today. They can download the sample project and use that.
It is. It's up on my website, and then right at the top there's a SDK tutorials button, and that'll filter out the blog post to just my tutorial stuff, and it's third one down at the moment.
Yeah, which if you guys haven't been over there, definitely recommend checking it out. JasonSchroeder.com. Like Jason's showing us, he's got in-app purchase promo code stuff over there, and color pickers, and there's even a finger painting example, which I thought was, a great way to, just pop up a project that's already been kind of put together and experiment with the function.
All of this is sort of, by the way, me trying. Corona Labs very generously sort of, made me an ambassador a year ago, and I was like, oh, great. And like, so here's what you should do. You should start having events. And I was like, I have 2 kids and a full-time job. I was like, I'm going to start making tutorials on my website.
That qualifies. That
haven't
counts.
Taken me out yet, so.
What, you don't want to go hang out and drink beer and tell people about it?
I would love to do that. My wife would just change the locks on me if I wasn't home to put the kids to sleep.
You're like, I've done all these events, but now I'm homeless.
But they gave you they'll give you a T-shirt and a backpack. So you good.
You got a backpack?
Oh, sorry. That was way back. Sorry.
I got the T-shirt though.
That's good stuff. Well, Jason, thanks for sharing that and for spending all the time and putting all that together. And I mean, it's clear that I think there's two people who are going to have an appreciation for today's conversation. One is the people who just want to put the thing into the application and have it work, one line of code. And then there's going to be the people who are appreciative of the behind-the-scenes stuff and how it all works and being able to dig through the code and see the things that you've done with it. And I would definitely encourage, if someone has a code suggestion or something like that, submit it, to Jason and let him. You guys discuss it, because it's only going to make this stuff better.
And it's definitely a work in progress. So as improvements happen, they'll be put up on the website, and I'll tweet it out. So. Yeah,
and you've already expressed that you're definitely open to those types of things. So it's the oily bubble has been popped, and it's like go contact Jason and let's get those things. I know Brian's like, well, oily bubble, what the heck does that mean? Well, when you have like a bubble ring that goes at it floating through the air, it's there, it's an object, but and it seems permanent. But if you reach out and touch it, it'll pop, right?
Stop with the similes, please. With the similes.
Ed's like, please make it stop. Please make it stop. But it's good stuff. So go check that out. Go check out the Progress Ring. Go check out the Color Picker, and do be sure to check out Social Poetry, which is an excellent app for creating magnetic style poetry in an app format.
Thank you.
Yeah, go check that out. And Star Crunch, aka Steven.
Right.
Thanks for contributing to the community and making a portion of this possible, because it sounds like it's all been building blocks, snapping all the pieces together. So.
Oh, I steal from everybody, Charles.
Hey, before we hang up, I know we're already over time here. I just wanted to ask. Stephen brought up something where I got I knew what it was, but I still got kind of a blank look on my face. It occurs to me that it would be a good topic if Stephen would be willing to cover it in the future, which is unit testing.
Ooh.
So, I mean, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but if you already do this and you've got like some examples in Lua of a reasonable unit testing framework, I definitely benefit from it.
I know of frameworks, but I don't have one that I actually use.
Oh, okay.
But I make tests, and then.
Okay. All right.
I'd be willing to have a conversation on that. Not me, because I don't know anything about it, but I would be willing for us to have a conversation about that, because just on unit testing in general, because I can guarantee you that there are people sitting out there right now who are shaking their head, who know of the concept of unit testing and have heard of the benefits of unit testing, but don't know how to write a unit test or don't know how to get started in that area. So even though it may not necessarily be Corona specific, or it may have a working example of workflow, at least if we could have a conversation about what it is, how it works, and maybe even an example of how you use it, I think that would be beneficial.
Yeah.
So okay. Yeah, we can talk more. We can talk more about that offline. But
Okay.
Yeah, it's definitely a good topic for consideration. All right, guys. Well, thanks for being here. We'll be back here next Monday, probably talking about Composer stuff. I think we have a little bit to wrap up. We're going to talk about creating custom Composer transitions and maybe a few other house cleaning items on that topic. But until then, have a great week and happy coding.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Meow.